genealogy. This was born out of a resolution that was passed by a former representative, Representative Stacey Lynn, the former Representative Stacey Lynn Eli from Nanakuli and parts of the west side, and the west side of this island houses the most Native Hawaiians, and she understood the need for it, and so we were able to pass that resolution, and in December of 2022, we were able to collectively launch the report in community with all of our protectors and good hunters. And so that's the genealogy of this. And really this genealogy comes from a lot of our First Nations, Indigenous relatives across the world, specifically Turtle Island and what is so-called Canada and so-called the United States. So we will honor them as well and how we're learning in community with them. Next slide, please. So the summary of the key findings were 21% of Hawaii's population identified as Native Hawaiians that were either murdered or missing. 10.2% of Hawaii's population identified as Native Hawaiian female. I'm sorry, the 21% is Hawaii's population 21% of our population here in Hawaii identify as Native Hawaiian. 10.2 identify as Native Hawaiian female, and 0.49% of our population identify as underage Native Hawaiian, so under the age of 18. Next slide. Another key finding is that the average profile of a missing child is a 15-year-old female Kanaka Maoli, missing on Oahu, specifically Waikīkī. So, I know a lot of our relatives are staying in this area, and a mihi that it is not what it should be, but I dream of the world that it will be Waikīkī again, where the ways are nourishing instead of being extracted. So please heed this data and the statistic when you are traversing in Waikīkī. Another key finding, sorry, next slide. And thank you to our PowerPoint technology person and to the Ahupua, who are all in charge of the technology that they're aligning with us right now. 2,000 is the number of cases of missing children in Hawaii each year. Next slide. So some more key findings, 25% of missing girls in Hawaii are Kanaka Maoli. 43% were sex trafficking, identified as sex trafficking. And again, those being trafficked, again, were frequenting Waikīkī. This is it's a little distorted, but it's a helpful timeline. I think, in my own family, and I do share that my family endured two folks that did go missing. I had an auntie and my cousin, who was male, that both went missing due to mental health crisis. But luckily, in the first 48 hours, we were able to find them, and they were able to be returned home. But this is one part that I find very helpful because, and this is, I want to acknowledge that this work was done in collaboration with folks who have produced the research ahead of time and transcriptions or interpretations of our Olelo Hawaii that have showed us that this was not our practice, that it was brought to our shores. The extraction and not understanding that we are sacred and that this sort of sex trade or extraction of our bodies, much like the extraction of our water and our extraction of the minerals of our water, are not of us. And so I think for me and for my family and for many of the families that we've sat with, we're not to blame. Is there accountability? Absolutely, but we are not to blame for this. This is not of us, and there are ways in community and together that we can free ourselves of that. I think I just want to skip through some of to ensure that we are on time, but a summary of the driving factors is that, folks, that again, there are systemic issues here that are driving folks into the sex trade, high poverty risk, and those are identified as anywhere from age 15 and 25 at poverty statistics of Kanaka Maoli and women and girls who are experiencing this. And I think the last maybe summary of guiding factors. And so 83% of known sex traffickers in Hawaii are male, and their most common relationship that a trafficker has with a victim is a pimp. And 71% is trafficking victims are below the age of 19. And then 46.8% of those human trafficking cases are commercial sexual exploitation of the child. And so if we can go to the current directions. So right now we are actively working on part 2, the story collecting. And so we're looking for to increase, representation across our oceanic relatives into the report. Of course, we're centering Native Hawaiians, but we also know that they're using the ocean. Instead of using it to connect us, they're using it as a ways to exploit us and to literally carry our bodies across through the sex trade. Again, and we also are trying to, ensure that we are including our mahū and our third gender folks in the report and more of their narratives and their stories. We are community driven, and we are trying to integrate a community care toolkit. We do have one. There is a QR code with both the first part of the report and a small one pager. It's back and front of kind of the description of why it's necessary, and then on the back, in the event during RIMPAC, someone should find themselves being exploited or harmed during RIMPAC. So that is just the foundation of where we want to go, and integrate a longer toolkit that we've seen being done, again, across Turtle Island, in our relatives, Dene, who are from Dene or Navajo Nation, that we were given some guidance from them. We can just go to the mahalo. So just mahalo to those that are collaborating with us on the report, and to our matriarchs, our relatives, our mothers, our aunties, our sisters in the struggle here with us today, all of you for showing up, because I know that this work calls people in, because it is such a heavy, it's kaumaha, right? And kaumaha is heavy, but it's meant to be lifted. And I know as I look around the room, each and every one of you, especially having our relatives across Monanuiakea here, that again, we will rise, and we will not drown in the various ways. Climate change, those extracting our lands and our waters and our bodies, we will call all of them in. We will call land back, we will call moana back, we will call our bodies back. And so, I don't want to take up any more time. I apologize if I'm nervous. Numbers are not my friend. But just if you know my Dr. Nikki Cristobal, has a wonderful baby who is just shy of 2 months old and couldn't be here with us, so I was just her stand-in, just the second fiddle. I wish I could play the fiddle. Actually, I wish I could play the viola, but that's aside. But please contact us. That is her cell phone as well. That's my cell or my WhatsApp, and that you can reach us on if you are feeling called to support this work, or you have a story to share. Or you want to be, however we can support you as we all forge forward in this work. Because no more stolen sisters, no more stolen relatives, no more stolen land and water.
Mahalo Kona for that and the amazing work that you do. Aloha again, my name is Iune from Waimanalo, a place where also is choke kanafa, and the cases of MMIWG or MMNHWG. The acronym gets longer every single time, but it's good to be more inclusive. It's a place where that happens, and you know that, thinking about MMIWG, MMNHWG, this crisis is so heavily connected to the two systems that suppress us the most, which is tourism and militarization, which is what I'll be talking about a little bit today. Incredibly timely, given that it's a RIMPAC year. but also incredible that we get to have this conversation because it's also FESPA. So in the midst of all this like paumaha, in the midst of all this eha, seeing our brothers and sisters and our siblings from Moana show up for us has been incredibly amazing. Shout out to the Aotearoa delegation for rocking a kufia. I don't know if you were there, but it was you. Incredible, and shout out to whoever made the lau. That was incredible. If you didn't have any lau yet, you should try it. They weren't scared to throw fat, and bless them because I'm a little woozy, but it's all good. Allah again, I'll be talking about ʻāina, particularly the Hawaiian archipelago to Palestina or Palestine, talking about militarization as it relates to RIMPAC, but U.S. imperialism, settler colonialism, and American occupation, and the ways in which I want to encourage folks to think about the occupation of Hawai'i and Palestine is that they're both occupation projects backed by the United States. Although Israel is the occupying country, Israel would not exist as it does today, if at all, if it weren't for the United States funding them. So thinking about and blaming and holding the United States accountable, even if they're proposing for a ceasefire now, it's too late. Even before October 7th, like they had 2 generations now to pull out of this occupying force. So understanding that the US is heavily interconnected into Israel. It's not a separate state, but an extension of US imperialism. And so if we could go into the next slide, that would be incredible. So just an overview to stay organized. I'll be looking at occupation of Hawaii and Palestine. I'm looking at demilitarization in context, ʻāina, or maps, and nupepa or newspaper articles of Palestina or Palestine. He couldn't be here today, but I want to give a special shout out to Wahi, my best friend and someone who's been doing this type of research and type of this music with me in relation to Palestine for years now. So he couldn't be here. Shout out to him. And then some key takeaways, and I'll wrap it up there. Next slide, please. So looking at demilitarization in context. So how did this ike, how did this knowledge come to be, and what kuleana or responsibility do I have contributing to this body of knowledge? I think it's important, if I'm going to talk about something that I'm passionate about, that I have to show the kahua, or the foundation that I stand on. There's a lot of folks who just talk, but I feel like I was able to speak here today because, in the words of Kumuhananeke Trask, I've done my homework, at least a little bit. So looking at why we should be talking about this, demilitarization in context is understanding our lahui, the Hawaiian nation, Hawaiian people, and understanding that there's also an epidemic of conservatism and right-wing ideology that's plaguing our peoples. And we see this in other communities of color as well, where because we're in dire straits, especially post-pandemic, that conservatism has told people of color, has told Native peoples that if you align yourselves with settler colonialism, and if you align yourselves with white supremacy, that you'll reap the benefits that suppressed you, so that white people could have it in the first place. So understanding that the struggle and the fight right now is a physical one, but it's also an ideological one, and seeing a lot of Kanaka Maoli, predominantly like in heavily concentrated Native Hawaiian communities, like the West Side, Wamanalo, like having this ideological shift to conservatism, and Hawaiians aligning themselves with Israel because we're not all on the same side here politically, has been devastating. And the reason why is because of colonialism and because of our occupation that keeps Kanaka Maoli strategically uninformed about our history and the US's history at that. So understanding that while I'm here today, there's folks that I love so much in my community that are still struggling with this. And I hope in having these conversations that we can go out into our communities today and talk about it. Yeah, it's not just about this panel. Also talking about the kahua I stand on, an intellectual moku, how an intellectual genealogy is incredibly important. I never not knew that I was Kanaka Maoli. I always understood that. But in terms of being politically conscious and understanding that my identity as Kanaka Maoli is heavily rooted, or should be heavily rooted, in the fight for the occupation is something that I've only been in the game with for 7 years, and I'm like not afraid to admit that because that's the more typical experience of Kanaka Maoli living in Hawaii. But when I got my ono, my hunger, this desire for ea Hawaii, Hawaiian sovereignty, kumu like Noelani Goodyear Kaupua, Kupuna Vairai, Cindy Franklin, Jamaica Osorio was my advisor. I promise I'm gonna get my proposal and I'll work on it tonight, I promise. This intellectual mo'okuo, I didn't learn or get the hunger for Hawaiian sovereignty in our history, culture, and language without being fed the honor or desire to learn about Palestine. Even if you look at the intellectual Moku of Kumuhanani K. Trask, in her writings and in her speeches, she is mentioning Palestine. She talks about the Congo, she talks about West Papua. And so understanding that the fight for a sovereign Hawaii is also a fight for deoccupied Palestine, and that our solidarity should never be conditional. It's the same problem that goes into solidarity. And one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on my research, but also my life's work in organizing around Palestine, is seeing how Palestinians showed up for us on the Mauna. You know, there wasn't an Israeli flag there. Hell no. The Palestinian flag, the Palestine flag was there. And it was just brought to tears, and my heart has been molded in a different way, seeing Palestinians in Bethlehem and Gaza and other parts of Palestine holding up signs in support of Mauna Kea and sending that to us. The fact that our occupation, it's heavily militarized, but we're not facing violence in the same ways that they are. And the fact that they showed aloha for us and have aloha for our ʻāina under such dire consequences made me feel so compelled to connect these struggles and speak up. And also building relationships with Palestinians. So folks in this picture, Man, who's from Palestine, getting to bring Palestinians every year to Hawaii and building that relationship has motivated me to build solidarity. And then art as activism, so as an artist, as an organizer, using hip hop as a political tool. Political education is something I'm super interested in. Kona and I have dropped many a batter. That's one of them, and we never got to call. Okay, maybe this is another video. Our tag is on the thing. Anyways, just kidding. Someone else named Lihi. Anyways, next slide, please. Oh, Lalo is hitting. So some major sections, I'm gonna try and go through this to be conscious of time, is the occupation of Hawaii and Palestine, Israel and Hawaii in the Pacific, especially with RIMPAC, and solidarity between Hawaii and Palestine. Next slide, please. So 3 quick sections, breaking it down. So Daniel K. Inouye, RIMPAC and militarization, and Larry Ellison, all 3 things that you should be conscious with if you're living in Hawaii or visiting Hawaii. So Daniel K. Inouye, if you flew in, or if you've ever left Hawaii, there's an airport named after him. He's the most celebrated non-Israeli politician in Israel. So in the context of Israel, there's seldom anything named after any non-Israeli, and he's the only US politician or non-Israeli politician to have something named after him. And it's a weapons testing site and a missile testing site that's named after Daniel K. Inouye. And that's because out of every single US politician, he was arguably the largest catalyst for the US supporting Israel. And so he was able to rise in political power because of settler colonialism in Hawaii. And a deoccupied and a sovereign Hawaii, the support for Zionism, I believe, would not exist. So our settlers are able to conduct genocide and support other occupations because of our own occupation here at home. So yeah, so making that connection between settler colonialism, settlers are able to align themselves with white supremacy in the US because we are occupied. And if we were free, that wouldn't happen. Next is RIMPAC and militarization. RIMPAC stands for Rim of the Pacific. As previously stated by Healani, Israel has been invited this year and has been invited, I think since its inception, or at least post-1948. It's military war games, including Israel. Lockheed Martin, whose headquarters are about 2 miles from this place, so not very far at all. They're huge weapons manufacturers and producers. And the really problematic thing about this is that during RIMPAC, particularly off the shores of our archipelago, but also at Pohakuloa and even before in Moku, they would test these weapons, these bombs, but also surveillance technology. And then at the convention center, where FESPAC is largely being held right now, one of the world's largest arms deals will be held in that convention center, where the weapons tested on our ʻāina and on our Wahi would be sold to states such as Israel. And so thinking about how Lockheed Martin has headquarters here, and our ʻāina and our Wahi is being desecrated, but then these weapons are being sold to another occupying state to be used physically on Palestinians. We may be far away, but that connection there's nothing more intimate than that type of violence. And it's happening in Hawaii so that it can happen in other places in the world. And when we're talking about RIMPAC and militarization, talking about Red Hill, Kapu, we're really happy that these tanks are being drained. but it's also at the expense of Olongapo and Filipinos, where that fuel is now being moved to the Philippines. And while I'm really happy for Hawaii, I would be remiss to say that I'm not furious for the Philippines as well, where our tanks shouldn't be drained just for the suppression of other people. So thinking about how that solidarity has to go hand in hand, and how we can't just fight for our own freedom without being conscious of others as well. Last but not least, Larry Ellison, such a jerk. Yeah, it sucks, man. It's weird. Owns the majority of Lanai, which he purchased only about, I think, $200 million, which is like chump change to a billionaire. And he used Lanai between 2019 and 2022 to protect Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been charged with countless war crimes. It's even been taken to Geneva. But in order to evade persecution in the United States and also Israel, because he's that bad, that Israelis are like, we don't like him that much, it's crazy, right? He used Lanai to shield him, and has also used Lanai for other AI developing and testing sites through Oracle, which is the company that's generated him so much money. So thinking about Daniel Kekinoe, RIMPAC and militarization, and Larry Ellison, none of these things would be tolerated in a deoccupied Hawaii whatsoever. Next slide, please. So taking it outside of the context of just Hawaii, Israel, and Hawaii in the Pacific, there was a huge opposition where Pacific countries made up a majority of countries throughout the entire world who opposed a ceasefire in Gaza. And that was the UN General Assembly's vote held on October 27th. If you just Google that, there's like a 4-page report on that. But some of these countries in the Pacific who voted no to a ceasefire were Fiji, Tonga, Papua New Guinea, Marshall Islands, Nauru, and the Federated States of Micronesia. A majority of the countries who voted no were countries in the Pacific. And so when we talk about recognition, when we talk about sovereignty, if that sovereignty is state-centric and based on Westphalian or Eurocentric notions of governance, poho, lose money. So many of these Pacific countries have more in common with Palestine than Israel. And we've seen that, and we keep on seeing that throughout this week. And shout out to Fiji for talking about New Caledonia and West Papua, because they hold it down. Yeah, looking at how folks in smaller countries needed to align themselves with Eurocentric notions of sovereignty in order to be seen. And for us as Kanaka Maoli, there's sovereignty, and then there's ʻēa. And that's the thing I'm most hungry for. ʻēa, life, breath to rise. Yes, it can contain sovereignty, but if we can't see each other outside of Western notions of the state, then do we really understand what it means to be in community and to be in relation? And we're talking about how moana nui akea, this ocean is what connects us and divides us. But what's dividing us right now are these invisible and like these imaginary lines of what a state is. But moving on, trying to speed up a little bit. Evangelical movements and being aligned with the U.S. You can't talk about colonization without talking about Christianity and Mormonism. And I have aloha for folks who are religious. So many folks in our Kanaka community are Christian, Catholic, or another Abrahamic religion. But you can't deny yourselves from the fact that folks are politically motivated to align themselves with Israel because of Christianity. And Christianity, as someone who's grown up in the church, teaches folks to support Zionism. So you can't separate that. And looking again as a step towards being taken seriously by other imperial powers is to align ourselves with the US or France or Britain, other imperial powers who support Zionism. Again, looking at ʻēa for sovereignty. Sovereignty centers the West, it's based on rights and ownership, where ʻēa, life, sovereignty, breath to rise, is based on belonging, rooted in language, culture, and community consciousness, and it's all-encompassing of what it means to truly be free. So the fun part is solidarity. While we're bogged down by BS, settler politicians, Lockheed Martin, RIMPAC, there's never not been an incredible and intimate joy shared between Kanaka and Palestinians, both in Hawaii and within Palestine. You see right here, top left corner is the Palestinian flag, and the Mauna, Sumaya Awad, Eleni and I cruising at Cindy Franklin's house, an incredible Jewish ally to Palestinians and Kanaka Maoli. Palestinians supporting Mauna Kea, a map of Palestine that was carved in the 1800s at Lahaina Luna, which I'll talk about a little bit. Malia Osorio, who's not in the house, but shout out to Malia Osorio for building that solidarity for years now, and an incredible portrait of Hanani K. Trask that was painted by an incredible Palestinian artist. Okay, next slide, please. And so I'm going to glaze through this. I call Mike for talking quite long, but what I want people to understand is that the intimate relationship, the diplomacy, and the friendship that Palestinians and Hawaiians had exists long before the occupation of Palestine and Hawaii. And we can see that with these key or these images that were carved of Palestine at ʻāina. Next slide, please. And so shout out to Kawila Mahi, who's done the research to dig this up from Hawaii Mission Archives. So these are some colorful ʻāina of Palestina, both on the left and right side. And I think this really speaks to how well you understand a people and a place when the names of their rivers, their mountains, and their seas have a word, mahū Hawaii, or in the Hawaiian language. As Kanaka, you don't talk about a place, you don't write about a place unless you know it and it's people. If not, that's mahū, that's being nosy. So this map alone is just evidence of how well we've been in relation with Palestinians. Next slide, please. So connecting these struggles of ʻāina and Palestine, also shout out to Kawila for this, is when it comes to water issues, land issues, ʻāina itself, Maui itself has always been on the forefront of protecting our lands and waters, as Nomea Hoshino. And then Kasan Kalafani says, the Palestinian cause is not a cause for Palestinians only, but a cause for every revolutionary, wherever he is, as a cause of the exploited and oppressed masses in that era. So these two issues, what's happening in ʻāina, what happened in ʻāina, what's happening in Palestine, they're both products of US occupation and imperialism. These problems wouldn't exist if it weren't for that. Next slide, please. We also have Kanikau, or a dirge, a chant of lamentation, that was written with Timoteo Ha'ilileo, and it also references the beauty of Palestine within this dirge. Next slide, please. And there's also over 100 New Pepper, Hawaiian language newspaper article entries talking about Palestine, talking about Gaza, talking about Bethlehem, I mean, in beautiful ways, in ways that don't even mention occupation because it's not even something that's in our consciousness. Yeah, this is in the 1800s. Yeah, so if you want to look at that, just briefly. Yeah, entries of Palestine in the New Pepper. Next slide, please. And there's also different oli that are included. I'm gonna read this poem by Fadwa Khan, who has been incredible in getting not just Palestinians but also Hawaiians to think about our own occupation, but also the beauty of being in community. Fadwa says, "Enough for me to die in her earth, to be buried in her, to melt and vanish into her soil, and sprout forth as a flower, played with by a child from my country. Enough for me to remain in my country's embrace, to be in her close as a handful of dust, a sprig of grass, a flower." And for me, if that's not Aloha ʻāina, then I don't know what is. And that can be expressed in any language or by any peoples. And as Indigenous peoples, being able to see folks' land, folks' ʻāina through their eyes is something that Palestinians have always compelled us to do. Next slide, please. So key takeaways while I wrap up. The occupation of Hawaii and Palestine are both settler colonial projects backed by US imperialism. The occupation of Hawaii and the occupation of Palestine through Israel wouldn't exist if it weren't for the United States. And when we envision and fight for our own sovereignty, it cannot be at the other people's suffering, thinking about Pacific nations aligning themselves with Israel, and all that kind of heva. If we truly want to be free, it's not gonna come from Western-centric notions of recognition. It's sure as hell not going to come from the UN, where we've had to play this game for generations. And work in the UN is definitely a heavy and critical component, but there's so many other different ways to fight for air, and that comes from solidarity outside of the state recognition. And last but not least is that the pilina that Kanaka Palestinians have is older than both of our occupations. There was a time before colonialism and occupation, and I promise you that there sure as hell will be a time after that, and that's what we're fighting for now.
Oh, that was fire. Thank you so much. I just wanted, when Makana was speaking, I wanted to point out that one of the first point of contact was between, when she's talking about the report, when Captain Cook arrived here in 1778, the first transaction was that, was for sex, basically. That was, women were on that front line. we were the first contact with these sailors. And I also wanted to, just mahalo Ihilani for all of that research. I think that should lay the foundation for that connection between Hawaii and Palestine. I'm gonna take it to Natalie, Natalie, but I will introduce our other forum speaker. Her name is Laulani Tio, a mother, an activist, musician, artist, peace worker. She's a cultural birth and traditional health medicine worker from Ko'olapoko, Oahu. She has been a frontline activist in major Kanaka struggles for 3 decades and does a lot of work in health issues related to activism and colonization. She's the coordinator of Ho'opai Pono Peace Project, which works to build and support peace on all levels, from community, cultural conflict work to the restoration of Hawaii as an independent country dedicated to peace, from which our steadfast aloha can be a major source of healing and demilitarization for the entire earth. She's also an apprentice traditional bard under Elder Hakumele Liko Martin. Is Liko here, by the way? Oh, yes, we are so honored. Uncle Liko Martin's here. He's a legend in Aloha ʻāina. He was there at the beginning of our movement, literally, and he's still going. Mahalo, Uncle Liko, for coming. Mahalo. So thank you, Laulani, for coming. And I was hoping Natalie could make some connections with your work in the North Dakota pipeline protest and Wahi and occupation. And this is, thank you so much, everyone, for this great discussion so far. And at the end, I just want to say there will be time for questions, comments from the audience. Mahalo.
Invenchu kai pika stekimanta, nchatanan chaiki, nyoka sutimina talisegovia, nyoka kosko purumantakare. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natalie Segovia. I am Quechua from Peru, also part of the Pacific. And honored to be here with you all. I'm grateful for the invitation to be here with the sisters that are doing this incredible warrior work. And it's humbling for me and inspiring to see youth coming up. I know I look like I'm 14, I'm not. I recently was in South Dakota and I saw an uncle that was 8 years old. He's like, boy, you look a little older than the last time I saw you. He was like, I hope so. But I'm really honored to be here. One of the things, as currently I'm the executive director of the Water Protector Legal Collective. We started in 2016 at Standing Rock, literally formed out of necessity, as so many organizations and frontline efforts happen out of necessity, in defense of over 800 criminal cases that were brought by the state of North Dakota against water protectors, those that were standing, both indigenous and non-indigenous allies that were standing to protect the water. And also treaty rights, right, to protect the human rights, the rights of our non-human relatives, and specifically the water as a life-giving force. Understanding that water is something, yes, that unites us, but also has been weaponized against us, and is continually weaponized because of the extractive industries that have been so often linked to the missing and murdered indigenous women pandemic within all of Amelia, Turtle Island, right, North and North America, or what is termed North America. And that has been extended here, right, in all the information and data that Makanalani was presenting. We've seen that in the context of missing and murdered indigenous women and that conversation, there is a lack of empirical data and knowledge about what is happening in the Pacific. There's a lack of empirical data, and that includes Alaska. Right? When we're talking about RIMPAC exercises are also held in Alaska and have been destructive of the Arctic and have been destructive of the spaces where the U.S. military has constantly and had a presence. So when we're talking about militarization, we're talking about the militarization that comes and impacts our lands, our people, indigenous peoples of the entire world, but in particular, the violence that comes as a result of military occupation and the resulting militarization against our, not just our women and our Two-Spirit folks, but also the land and the earth itself. And so that violence is something that we saw firsthand and experienced and have continued to deal with in the years since Standing Rock. To date, there is still information coming out about the Tigers Fund private military security company that was employed by Energy Transfer Partners at Tigers Fund, and the effects to which and the extent to which they went to not just believe and perceive water protectors as eco-terrorists, as jihadists, as militants, as insurgents, right, when they were protecting the water, but also specifically targeting via sexual violence of women, Indigenous women, right? And so the link between extraction and Indigenous women is something that has been studied extensively, particularly in the context of North America. But here today, one of the important links that I think is not as talked about is the link with militarization. And that link is pervasive in the Pacific. When we're talking about the military presence worldwide, we're talking about over, some conservative estimates say 750 military bases worldwide. Other estimates and counts say over 1,000 US military bases worldwide in over 80 countries in the world. When we're talking about the Pacific, in the Pacific alone, there are 400 military bases and over 300,000 deployed troops, 60% of which include the US Navy alone, also in the Pacific. Japan is the place with the highest number of US bases, including 120 active bases, followed by Germany and which is 119, and South Korea, again in the Pacific, 73. And I know we have relatives here from Guam, and 54 in Guam. Here alone in Hawaii, there are 14 bases. When I was looking at the information, it fluctuated between 7 to 14, and I was like, what's interesting about it is that there is if you look at DoD records and the counts that DoD has, right, Department of Defense, they look at presenting information and lessening their footprint of how many bases, what qualifies as a base. When we're talking about military bases, we are talking about places by definition that are over 4 acres. We're not talking about other places that are also strategically used for military purposes. So that alone should give us an idea that not only are there over 1,000 of these US bases, over 400 military bases in the Pacific, but there's other smaller, what they call lily pads, smaller than 4 acres, but are actively being used, right? And actively exploiting the land and the water in all of the places that they are. And I know, Helani, you've done so much work with Oahu water protectors, and we're so grateful, and it's one of the honors that we've had as an organization to be able to partner in some small measure with you all and also with Sierra Club of Hawaii that have done such incredible work to shed light on the impact of the US Navy on the water, on the Wahi, right? On how exactly the presence of the military has impacted the ability to even have existence here, right? To live. And that's ultimately what we're speaking about today, is that when we have these military in all its forms, in the different places that it's been, it impacts our ability to have the kind of life, the kind of, not just sovereignty, as our sister said, but self-determination is often the standard that's invoked at the international level. Under international law, self-determination is the highest standard that we look at in terms of human rights and the human rights framework. But what's sort of missed in the English is really present in Spanish. And in Spanish, we don't say self-determination, right? The self kind of gets lost. It's libre determinación de los pueblos, which is the free determination of peoples, right? There is a praxis element in the self-determination. There is an active element in the self-determination. there is a fire that is sometimes missing in the English of this practice of self-determination. One of our elders and mentors who now join the ancestors, Supak Enrique Costa, used to tell knock-knock jokes, and one of his knock-knock jokes was, why did the chicken cross the road? He was practicing his self-determination, right? And I think that's a great way to explain it to children, right? And to all of us, to understand that self-determination is a praxis, that it requires action, that it requires us to be active, that it requires us to be invested in a process that doesn't happen overnight, that, I've seen chickens crossing the road here in Hawaii, and man, I'm worried for them. I'm like, there's a car coming this way, there's multiple cars coming that way. We have Auntie Sandra Creamer here from Australia who's visiting, and she's like, wow, those chickens, they're crossing with their little ones, but they're making it across the road. Somehow they're making it. And the question is, like, how do we, learn from them, that somehow they managed to make it across the road unscathed each time. I'm like, oh gosh, they have like morphed into super chickens. But also understanding that we have these challenges, right? That the road to self-determination is long, and that we're here for a long game. When we are talking about, Ilani said, there was a pre-colonization, and there will be a post-colonization. The idea that we're in some kind of post-colonial world because, Africa was decolonized and lots of places were decolonized, and we like talking about decolonization, decolonize our mind, decolonize the university, decolonize. What about indigenize? How about fighting for and imagining what are the things that we can invoke into, right, and pull into and call into the world that we want to envision? Not just the world that we're trying to break apart or break down because of the things that have been part of the systems that are systemic, that oppress us, right? And the systemic oppressions that we have to face on a daily basis as Indigenous peoples of the world. But because we're here today in the Pacific, these struggles are related. That's part of why we had people here from Hawaii that were at Standing Rock, right? That connection was there. The connection that I know that there were people that came, from our organization back to Mauna Kea in 2019. There is a constant need for solidarity. There's a constant need for that ability to understand that our struggles for liberation are united and they're one. As we look at, it's hard to look at statistics, right? Makanalani was sharing a lot of the statistics at the outset, and there's more, right? When you take the time to look at the statistics, it's a really grim picture. And it's a picture that I know each and every one of you walking in the door today already knew in some small measure, right? In some small measure, the fact that you're all here and those that are tuning in on Zoom, like the reality is that you came because you have an interest in learning more. But how do we get the people to communicate these issues to people that are not in the room, right? How do we tell people that these are some of the grim statistics that we are affronting as and confronting and have to deal with as Indigenous peoples of the world? And in the Pacific, why is this something that is so important? Helani, I saw your tweet the other day about FESPAC, and I was reading it to some folks. Helani... Well,
but I'm a truth teller.
So for those that didn't see Helani's tweet, Helani said, one of the things, like why, I was talking to my partner who's Kanaka Maoli and is here today in the red Mauna Kea, Kiai Mauna, Kukiai Mauna hat. But, I was telling him, I was like, we were talking, nobody in the context of FESPAC, nobody's actually brought up militarization, right? There was like maybe one person that kind of started talking about it, but there's a fear to talk about what things are that we are all seeing that is absolutely present in the Pacific, right? And Helani said, well, on Twitter, that I happened to read, she said, how are we gonna talk about it at FestPac if one of the sponsors of FestPac is the military, right? And if you look at the FestPac sponsors, it's military base after military base after military base, and we forget, or we don't forget, Hawaii is the Indo-Pacific Command, right? We're like, I'm not Hawaiian, but when I land on Oahu sometimes and it flies over the military bases, my blood boils. Because it's an indigenous understanding of what the militarization has done across the world and continues to do here in this land on this ʻāina, and for the Wahi here, right? And for the people here. And Makanalani, when you talked about the children, you sped through this part, but I was like, linger on this one, because you talked about children under the age of 15. Just let that sink in for a minute. I am sure you have nieces, nephews, sisters, somebody in your family under the age of 15. This past week, we put some information out on the impact of militarization and water in the Pacific, but also on missing and murdered Indigenous women from Water Protector Legal Collective. And I have to say that we decided against publishing a long list of statistics about Okinawa because the statistics were so graphic that it was too much, even for us as a legal organization that have to see constant information that is harrowing. But I'm saying it here because it's important for us to understand that the kind of violence and the kind of sexual violence that we see explicitly from the military is not just women in the grown women that are making decisions to go to a military, right, and making decisions under duress. We're talking about coerced decisions. It's not an active choice, right, when it's under duress. But in Okinawa, what has come out is children, right? We're talking about from the ages of zero, right, just born to the age of 15. And so that is something that I don't think we can gloss over. It's something that we have to recognize, and it's something that, you know, without engaging in trauma porn, right, which is also something that's difficult today because, and we all bring as Indigenous peoples like historical trauma, epigenetic trauma, we carry that with us. But we also have to be able to confront these statistics and understand that it is part of the reality that we are fighting against, so that our relatives that are from the ages of 0 to 15, our women, our elders, don't have to experience this anymore. That the stolen generations, right, of those that were at boarding schools, those that were had to be separated from their families, the missing and murdered. It's not just missing and murdered. They don't magically go missing and they don't magically appear murdered, right? This is something that happens because somebody is doing this. At Line 3 it's by Enbridge, the Canadian company, in Minnesota, there were over 900 arrests from water protectors that were putting their bodies on the line to protect the water in Minnesota. And one of the things that came out of Line 3 is that there is an understanding by corporations, right? Just like there is an understanding by the military, but there's an understanding by corporations that their actions lead to extraction, and their extraction leads to violence against women. And so Enbridge was required by the state of Minnesota to have a public security fund. This was several $1 million to deal with the foreseen effects of human trafficking. So what that meant was that they expected that at Line 3, because of the extractive pipeline that was being built, there would be Indigenous women that would be trafficked. And they were required to have a fund to not only help with the law enforcement and the policing, but also to defend, right, to finance the defense of pipeline workers that would be charged with cases for trafficking in the context of Line 3. So in some ways, you know, people saw this, advocates saw this as like, okay, this is a partial win. I mean, it's horrifying that we're talking about it that way, but it was a partial win because it was a recognition that corporations understand what it is that they're doing, right? And understand that their actions have a direct effect on not just the earth and the water, right? But also on our women, on our girls, on our two-spirit relatives. So the question is, when is that going to happen with the military? And the reality is that it's not going to happen unless we push for it. Because these kinds of cases are wrapped up in military tribunals, right? These cases don't go into the court system. When was the last time you heard about a military person, right, service member that was dragged into a court in a public system? They go through private tribunals, and so they escape the traditional areas of the law. And so we have to look outside, right? We have to look at other ways. Maybe it's international law. That's one area. But as Ihilani said, you know, the UN is a great venue, but it's not the only venue, right? Like we saw with the Oahu water protectors and the Red Hill fight. I talk about it often when I'm talking to law students that are going through and studying law and you know, saying, oh, okay, you know, I want to become a lawyer to affect change. But the reality is that the law is sometimes opposed to that change that we're fighting for. And so what do we have to do? People take to, right? We saw Ernie Lau from the Board of Water Supply and really partnering with the people and seeing that collective change, through collective change, we can actually accomplish something. And so I think I went off script here, but really just to say that I think we have an opportunity. This is an incredible opportunity not to be only in this space with all of our relatives here, but also to be able to share the information that we do have, right? Not to shy away from the statistics, not to shy away from the quantitative, because we have to know it. We have to be able to communicate in some small measure, in some small way, what it is that we already know because it's lived experience, because we have seen it, because our relatives have experienced it, because we know that it affects our lands, our waters, and we know that it's affecting our future generations. Right? How do we know, how can we have future generations if they can't drink the water? Right? How can we have future generations if they're being exploited, right? And they're being trafficked? We can't. So we have to find a way to bring other people in and into the spaces that they aren't, and share and educate our relatives so that they can really truly understand what it is that we have seen for a long time and understand and know. Thank you so much.
Mahalo, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And I just wanted to say to, you know, as an Oahu water protector, it was the people who shut Red Hill down. And I want to recognize the Oahu water protectors in the room. Rebecca, is Jamaica here? Jamaica. It was all of us collectively that stood together, and it was our voices that brought the Navy to a point where they shut an actual base down. That's never happened, ever. So, and also, you know, just one comment about the fight for liberation and self-determination. It's no longer a political fight, it's a fight for our future. Because the way things are going now under occupation is absolutely, I mean, we're in a trajectory that will take us downhill. We're fighting for the lives and the futures of our children and our grandchildren. Liberation is a fight for life right now. Because of climate change, because of the rising seas, we're on the front line. We're the canary in the coal mine. Islands are disappearing. So, and you know, people always say, well, you know, Helani, you're in so many different issues. Well, heck, we're fighting a systemic power, right? So our resistance has to be systemic. We have to make those connections again. The Wahi, the military, the ʻāina, the women, I mean our children, it's all connected. And if we cannot get, because they've programmed us to see things, you know, to compartmentalize things in our world, like Fanon says, right? The colonized world is a compartmentalized world. We need to make those connections again. So, and I just mahalo, you know, as a water protector, it's the vai is when you as Kanaka, the water is the kinolau, is the physical manifestation of our spirit. If we lose the vai, if we lose the water, then we lose our spirit, our uhane. So that, you know, vai is in everything, it's in us. And so the fight for vai is the fight for life and liberation. And I just want to hand it off to Laulani.
Mahalo. Yeah. Okay, so mahalo. So RIMPAC. So I'm gonna talk a little bit about just my own experience, because I've been doing this for a while. We've been doing this, or some of us, Kalama, Lei, some of Uncle Liko have been doing this for a really long time. I really want to acknowledge that Uncle Liko has literally been an activist 1 year longer than RIMPAC has been in existence. Well, I shouldn't say, I think he's been an activist actually longer than that, but that was since Kalama Valley was a year before RIMPAC started. So that's a well-known struggle that began what we know of as the Kanaka Maoli movement. So, in this, you know, RIMPAC started out every year, and then it went to every 2 years. And since then, we've been fighting it every 2 years. You know, so every 2 years, we launch whatever we can, and every 2 years, we say, okay, we're gonna start early next time. We're gonna be, you know, we're gonna start the year before, and we're gonna totally organize this, and then everything else happens, you know, one battle after another, because we have to remember that RIMPAC is one of the manifestations of the United States military, and also all of the collective militaries of the world who are bombing and destroying our land and ocean. You know, to that whale out there who is being hit with sonar, and therefore, you know, breaches and gets the bends, and then shows up mysteriously dead or dying, you know, on our shores. It doesn't actually matter to them whether it was a United States bomb or one of their, somebody else's bomb, that were all tied in, even the quote unquote enemies of the United States, because of the war games, because of the triggering, because of the industrialization, the arms show. Let's face it, that's what RIMPAC really is at its fundamental core. It's a trade show for possibly the worst trade on this planet, war. Yeah? I want to, I feel like so many people had so many good facts about RIMPAC that I want to actually go a little bit to what the opposite of this is. You know, there's RIMPAC is the largest military exercise in the world, you know, and we're talking about the biggest and the baddest countries of the world getting together to bomb the largest ocean in the world, right? And to do the most destruction that can be possibly done in that ocean. So, what's the opposite of that? Is the question. And I'm going to say that it's us. It's us here, right now. I mean, honestly, when I walked into this room, I came up here, I was like, whoa, I was like kind of blown away because, I mean, here are, you know, my sisters in struggle from forever long, you know, my sister in struggle that I just met in Geneva, you know, my sisters my sister from Guahan, my other sister over here from the lands they call Australia, you know, and we know each other from all of these different places. But why? Why are we here? You know, it's not just to fight RIMPAC. It's beyond that. You know, there is a whole new thing that is coming up. You know, the young people, I see Ulu, Kanoa, you know, the Mima, the young people, every year, every moment, you know, all of our different kinds of people coming together, we are creating a world. And that is so important in the picture of things. You know, my program, Ho'opai Pono Peace Project, right? We get dissed a lot because, peace, you know, people are like over it, you know, because, you know, people have this idea, or people have been told for a long time that, oh, peace is when you just, you know, find this little balance in yourself, and you know, and you find calm, and, you know, and you just basically put up with all the bullshit, right? And that's the idea. But what is peace really? And that's really what I want to get to. What does peace really look like? And I'm going to say it looks like this room. Look, just take a look around. You know, look at the diversity. Look at the skills. Look at the strength. Look at the determination. Look at the love. You know, and I'm going to say peace has some ingredients to it. It's not the absence of war, but it is the opposite of it. And the reason is that it has these specific ingredients to it, at least from our cultural perspective, and I'm sure that in all of our different cultures, we have these same understandings, right? We have these fundamental understandings of these things, even if we call them something different. So, aloha. You know, aloha. I want to acknowledge some of my mentors all came from the same mentor, same teacher, whose name was Pilahi Paki. And she had a very famous saying, you could even say it was a prophecy, that when the world is hurting the most, when the world is, you know, when in its quest to find peace, because it comes to that point where it needs to, it will turn to Hawaii. And the reason it will turn to Hawaii is because we have the key. And that key is aloha. And it is very, very important to understand that in that prophecy, it's absolutely true. But we're not talking about aloha in the jar. You know, we're not talking about aloha, you know, that is funded by the, whatever, the various, or whoever, the state of Hawaii. It's not in the box Aloha we're talking about. We have to look at what the ingredients of Aloha are right now. The ingredient, one of the crucial ingredients in Aloha right now is resistance. Without resistance, we don't have truth. And without truth, and we don't have action, because truth and action put together kind of lends itself to resistance. Yeah? And that in turn is part and parcel of Aloha. It's the manifestation of Aloha. That is what that prophecy speaks to, is that manifestation of Aloha through resistance. Because as we encounter the opposite of peace, which is militarization, war, destruction of the earth, we are tasked with building true peace, on true Aloha, on true resistance. And right now, if you look at the world, here we are facing RIMPAC, where the United States and Israel are bombing Palestine and bombing Hawaii, right? There's some significance there. We're talking two ends of the earth, like quite literally, right? It's kind of like the two ears of the planet, yeah? And I'm going to say, if we can build peace from Hawaii and Palestine, we actually can achieve world peace. And this isn't some lofty kind thing now. We're talking about a necessary ingredient for survival of our future generations. As Lani said and Natalie said, we will not have future generations if we do not achieve world peace. Because if we do not achieve world peace, the quantity of nuclear bombs on this planet and the attitude of those who hold them are not that hard to do the math on, right? And we are in the most danger. If there's going to be one bomb going off anywhere, guess where the single most likely place that's going to happen is? Because we're standing on it. Yeah, we're standing on a place where every corner of this island has a nuclear base. And keep in mind, of course, we always need to keep in mind, we are in, ironically, the country, Hawaii, that pioneered the concept of neutrality on the world stage, and for the purpose of stopping militarization in the Pacific. And that is our country. It is our mission. It is what we fundamentally are, who we are. And when we stand, and we stand together with every single other sister, brother, mahū, everybody who has their own manifestation of that ʻēa, yeah, of that aloha, of that resistance. When we all stand together, we can in fact lift that blanket of colonialism, because it cannot be lifted just in one place. This is a global matter. And you know what the fundamental ingredient there is? Consensus, and which is based on consent. If you think about it, consent is the threshold of peace. Because if you have no consent, you have no peace. TMT, so there's a good example. I'm pretty sure we're very clear, we do not consent to TMT. yeah? So if somebody goes and tries to build TMT, then that is an act of aggression. And because of the nature of our country being illegally occupied, it is an act of war, yeah? And multiply that by all of the different hewa that are happening all over the world. Not just to the indigenous people, yeah, but to the planet, to all of the people. And we who have that kuleana of holding that aloha in all of its forms, all around the world, we have that power to collectively lift it. And it is through things like RIMPAC, ironically, right? It's through this awful, horrible devastation and almost annihilation of our peoples that we are coming together, and that we suddenly have that power that we did not have before. So we have that power to lift that blanket, and we all need to grab our corner in our own way. Some people get, you know, some people have the ability to hold it like this, some people are holding it like that, you know, some people have an artistic way of holding it, some people have a full-on ku'e way of holding it, some people have an academic way of holding it, whatever the case may be, the musical way, the many, many different ways, we in all of our different ways, it is going to take every single one of us standing together and lifting that with and using the power of our ea, the power of our aloha, the power of our pono, and our understanding of that pono. And each of us, with that understanding, lifts that beyond RIMPAC, beyond militarization, beyond all of the hewa, you know, and it will take each one of us. So, you know, on one hand, I feel kind of bad about like, oh, not organizing earlier, like last year, I meant to do it last year, meant to do it last week, meant to do it 1 hour ago, you know, but no, I was rushing in late, you know, because there's like a lot of things to do that we collectively, and it takes all of that, right? All of that kuleana, that duty that every single one of us have, are absolutely crucial. And in coming together, in building that together, in having the aloha for one another, and building that strong, and building our skills in real peace, which again requires real resistance, and it requires real understanding too. You know, the colonization is, it's a crazy game that hurts everybody, including the colonizers. You know, I mean, it's kind of like musical chairs, right? When I've tried to explain colonialism to little kids, I kind of like go to like musical chairs. You know, there's this one guy, and he's got the record player or whatever. You know, he's controlling the music, and he keeps stealing the chairs. You know, we don't know where he's putting them, into his bank account probably, but you know, he's taking those chairs and swiping them out for himself, and meanwhile everybody else is running around and trying to sit in some chair, and it doesn't matter whose chair it is, right? They're just about like, oh my God, I gotta find a chair. So I think it's really important to understand that game and then counter that game. So when we deal with militarization, we deal with this kind of hewa, we deal with the contamination of our water, the destruction of our land, these ridiculous games of release renewals and, you know, EIS processes and all this crazy, crazy stuff that it's like, you know, we're like whack-a-moling it all over the place. We need to remember that fundamentally our true kuleana is to those very, very simple things. It's to each other. It's to ʻēa, to manifesting our ʻēa. You know, then we got to remember that's the thing about ʻēa as sovereignty. It's not held by anybody else. It's not held by no president, king, government, nothing. I mean, we do have collective ʻēa, for sure, right? We have collective ʻēa. And that collective ʻēa is what is going to manifest in our resistance to bring up that power, to lift off that blanket, to, you know, to overcome that game, to start building that new world, that new paradigm, that new true peace on earth that is a very, very real thing. It's not some lofty who knows what. It's why we're all here. One another. And in doing so, we build that peace. We make it happen. We manifest that ʻēa. And we carry forward that indigenous mana'o. Even those who are not indigenous to the one particular place, you know, will be helping to move it forward, because the indigenous peoples of the given place fundamentally are indigenous because we have kuleana that came from the very first people and are going to the forever people who will always, always, always be here. And I want to close with one little piece of mana'o that seeing Kalama, I thought of your mom, Auntie Gwen Kim, and she always had this saying that, you know, one thing you don't ever have to worry about is missing the opportunity to address colonialism, because one thing you can always count on is that they're going to do something else just as stupid. Yeah, that's the one thing she drilled that one into us. So we should have time to take care of ourselves, take care of each other, and keep going. Ho'omau.
Mahalo, Laulani. 30 years, over 30, maybe 40, I don't know, in the movement. And I just want to recognize, I want to end with Tina. She's online. Tina Nata, she's from Aotearoa, and she has been an inspiration to me as a Kanaka Maoli, outspoken Kanaka Maoli here. She's outspoken in her homeland, so we have a lot in common. But I just want to recognize who's here. I mean, so I see some people from Aotearoa, some of our cousins from Aotearoa. Can you stand up if you're from Aotearoa? Or raise your hand so we know. Oh, mahalo for coming. Yay. I heard Guhan. Are you Guhan? Guhan, yeah, sorry, Guhan. Mahalo. Anywhere else? Oh, Australia. Sandra. Aloha. Thank you for coming. Welcome to Hawaii. Any other relatives from other places here? Mahalo for being here, and mahalo for being part of this space. I think we have over 100 people on Zoom as well. So I wanted Tina to kind of just wrap it up for us, and then we wanted to hear from you folks. But mahalo, Tina, for coming into our space and standing in solidarity with us here in Hawaii. It is one of those important times, you know, with FESPAC and RIMPAC and all of these things convening here in Hawaii. It's important to have these discussions with each other. But thank you, Tina. Mahalo.
Is that better? Yeah. You can hear me okay? Oh, cool. Okay. Thank you so much for the invite. And what an honor. I just really wanted to honor these amazing wahine. It's just giving me life listening to the corridor, just the height. The height of the corridor and the analytical nous between you all is really humbling and amazing. So I just want to all of you. You really are a testament to the power of wahine and Indigenous women when it comes to framing, liberation and justice, global justice and Indigenous justice. So thank you so much for the invite. It was wonderful to sit and listen to the corridor. As Helani mentioned, my name is Tina Ngata. I'm a Ngāti Parau wahine from the East Cape of the Ika Maui, Aotearoa. I just wanted to honor, Kalahui and Helani and all of the work that is done there for demilitarization in our Moana region. I'm an anti-colonial scholar. I say that very deliberately because I do believe deeply in the importance of weeding our mara from invasive species in order to allow our native to flourish. So I support re-indigenization, but that I also believe that that has to come with anti-colonialism as a fundamental step in re-indigenizing our spaces, because these colonial forces have become very good at hiding in plain sight. So we do need to look at and observe the colonial processes at a local and at a global level, right? Because colonialism was a global project. And so I wanted to again acknowledge the incredible connections that have been made here across various movements around the world to be able to connect the story and get some perspective on the global transnational nature of the colonial project. We know that one of the discursive tools of colonization is to domesticate our oppression, is to consistently get us to believe that our oppression is only happening at a local level or at a national level. They don't want us to see the global connections, because then we start to think about how we can globally connect, which is where the real power is when we start to globally connect as well. We've seen that Indigenous rights, discourse and movements have actually brought the world to an anti-colonial moment where the world is challenging the righteousness of colonial states like the US and the UK and even our nation states, Australia and New Zealand. And so we're at a time now where we're really primed to make good on this leadership that we have always held in Indigenous circles. So I wanted to celebrate that also, that was coming forth in everybody's corridor tonight. And it's so clear to see a lot of these colonial relationships at the international level. I wanted to acknowledge, you're so right what you said about the UN as one space, but it's a very compromised space. Israel, New Zealand, Australia, UK, Europe, and the USA and so-called USA and so-called Canada. In the UN, we are one voting bloc, we're one regional bloc. It is not based upon geographic proximity like all of the other regional blocs. Our regional bloc is based upon our shared experience of colonialism. So we can see that those colonial relationships, transnational colonial relationships, are still very present and defining the way in which we shape our alliances. And one of those key alliances at the moment is AUKUS as well. You know, the Australia, UK, US, and Canada, Australia, UK, and US military alliance, and New Zealand is increasingly becoming a part of that. And that is also, along with growing tensions between China and so-called USA, is collectively contributing towards French colonial violence in Kanaki. Where an audit mark of genocide are also being met by the French military, and where young Kanak are being shot in the streets right now, like a couple of months ago, having flamethrowers utilized against them on the streets because France wants to maintain its strategic military positioning in our Moana region in the same way that the US does. And they want to fulfill their clearly stated ambitions in the 2021 Indo-Pacific strategy as well. That's why they're carrying this kind of violence out. Because the Moana region is so strategically important to them, and they will tell us, you're just a little island. You don't mean much, you're just a little island. If we were all just little islands, then why are you so invested in our region and holding military domination in our region? It's because we are so economically and militarily strategically important to the global colonial project. Israel is such a core part of that because they've trained more police and military forces that have been utilized against indigenous movements around the world than anywhere else in the world. Mossad and IDF have trained people to brutalize indigenous people around the world as well. So when we take this kind of global perspective, look at this as a transnational perspective, we see that, you know, the global project has infrastructure, and that, you know, the fact that we are inconsequential is a very convenient colonial fiction that they try to get us to believe. But as our sister Sina Brown Davis says, indigenous rights are the roadblock to militarism. Standing together against militarism from an indigenous space does actually and has demonstrated to have the power to have to deliver infrastructural growth with global colonial military project. And I also wanted to acknowledge also, Helani, that you pointed out that there is a history to this, rooted in the doctrine of Christian discovery. That this is, and that sexual, sexual misconduct and sexual crimes, military sexual violence has been a part of this history from the invasion of Cook into the Moana region. And so it's the case right now. So we still see these things coming out, across history, but still now across Great Hill Island, Abiyala, and of course in the nation of Hawaii, in Guahan, in Kanaki, in Okinawa, sexual military violence is still present across all of those spaces and has been across time. So it's vital that we understand that the colonial project relies upon these transnational relationships. It's vital that we connect transnationally as indigenous nations. It's vital that we call out militarism and that we stand in solidarity. We have a Solidarity Day for Kanaki on the 26th of July, which I'll get all of the information out to you through Kalahui for that as well. And implicit spirit, military force is glue that holds the global colonial project together. You would not have colonialism without militarism. So it's vital that we never allow militarism to compromise our identities, because they have, as our brother Tupac Acosta used to say, that colonial machines become very sophisticated in co-opting indigeneity. They do that through recruiting indigenous people into the armed forces. They do that through indigenous optics, through green, blue, and brown washing. And in the same sense that we must uphold the indigeneity of the Palestinians who have always been present against colonialism, we also have to refute Israeli propaganda position for us and in spite of whoever the military funds or whatever kind of shit that they try to, Koshima, they try to do, we have to always recognize militarism for what it is. It's the glue that holds colonialism together. We have to recognize indigenous power and the power in our solidarity and resistance as well, so that we can be the roadblock to military violence around the world. So thank you again, everybody, for making those points so salient.
Mahalo, Tina. Thank you so much. You always inspire, and I knew you would have a good wrap up for everybody. But thank you so much, and that ends. And go to sleep. I'm sure it's so late over there. I'm so sorry. So if anybody has any comments or questions, we have a few minutes left. It's 8:17. We can go to 8:30. And then at 8:30, we'll have just a small presentation from Ihilani, or sorry, not a small presentation, Kalamai. It's going to be a powerful presentation, I know already. But yeah, just a few minutes. If anybody has any comments or questions, we have one in the back.
Yeah, this is for the panel. Anybody online, anybody in the audience? I got 3 quick questions. I boiled them down. Thank you. My name is Thomas Brandt. I've lived here 45 years. I'm not local, but I feel like it now. So, number one, who would you say is our best scholars in the indigenous sovereignty space who are imagining post-capitalist and post-nation state futures? That's number one. Number two, related, who has put the most thought?
Sorry. No, I think we're not going to go with you. We're going to move around. He's been here before. Sorry. Kalamai. Does anybody else have any questions or things to say?
Yeah. Aloha, Hafide. Oh my gosh, so wonderful to see all of you. So good to see you, Chetlu. I just wanted to make a comment about Guahan. Being that we're the oldest colony in the Pacific, and so we have a lot of that internalized racism and white supremacy that feed into that that same sort of conservatism. We have the same sort of struggle around conservatism, and we're really seeing it right now in the violence being that we in the protests for Palestine. We're seeing it with a lot of white settlers who come to the protests to harass us, but we're even seeing a few of our own people coming to harass us at the protests, which is completely heartbreaking. But I also wanted to speak to the voting, the UN voting, because it's so important to also contextualize it from our Micronesian experience, because not only are we the oldest colony in the Pacific, we're the most militarized islands in the Micronesian region other than the Marshall Islands, right? And so when you think about the voting, right, Palau right now has 4 major military projects, and a lot of those are without the consent of the Palauan people. The Marshall Islands, of course, devastated, right? And then Guahan and the Marianas. There's a huge military project in Tinian in the Northern Islands right now. So when Guahan is devastated by war, whenever we go into war, the backup places for the military to use the runways once the Air Force base is bombed in Guam are Tinian and Palau and Yap. So it's so important to think about. So Yap, it being a part of the Federated States of Micronesia, the reason why these countries voted, against the ceasefire resolutions in the UN is also because of the coercive, oppressive relationship with the United States and with the hyper-militarization and with the so-called economic investment, right, that comes from those pressures. So just to contextualize that, because there was a horrible backlash, of course, around the world. Like, who are these Micronesian islands? Who are these small islands in the Pacific that are voting against this ceasefire? It's so important to contextualize it in that colonial relationship, in the hyper-militarization that's currently happening right now. So I just wanted to make that point. And mahalo, mahalo, mahalo. Sidus Masi, then Miga Masi, you're also amazing. And we just sense Bulagonaiza and solidarity from our homeland. And thank you all so much for everything you do every single day. And your wonderful thread about FestPac. Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Yes, love you all so much. And so of course our Saina, Sandra Creamer. So honored to see you here, Saina. So, Sana Masi, everybody.
Thank you for making that for bringing that up. That's actually really an interesting connection to Palestine, and I think anybody want to respond to that? Anybody? Okay. So any other comments? That was a really good comment. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Bibi. I grew up here, but I also have family like all over, and a lot of sisters all over that are a part of MMIW. And like that really touched. I was like brought to tears throughout the whole entire presentation. One of my sisters in San Francisco recently got murdered. That's Michelle Henry. And you know, it's like really hard for the mahū wahine. And I guess just as a young little mahū, one thing I'm trying to do is like tackle that and like bring the sisters together. And I guess like as like really powerful mana wahine, and thank you for everything you guys have said. What are like steps to like keep strengthening our girls, keep strengthening our communities to protect our girls? Because I'm really reaching, because we shouldn't keep having our murdered and missing.
Thank you so much. You know, we talk about, and I think they had talked about the data not being available, and that probably on purpose. I'm so sorry for your sister. And this is one of the reasons why we made this gathering, to start thinking about systems of safety for each other. We basically have to depend on each other. And it's good to have these spaces. We created the space, we set the table. The discussion is about things that are important, and it's about our safety, right? And so just like our collective liberation, our safety has to be a collective effort as well. We need to literally hold each other, just arm in arm, and be there for each other. There's no way we're gonna fight this military-industrial complex on our own. And hopefully, you know, this will start a new conversation about that. You wanna say something?
First and foremost, I just want to say that I see you, and I see our mahū. I see them. And what was your sister's name? And I want you to, you know, in the what I've been taught in the MMIWR, murdered, missing Indigenous women and relatives, is that we say their names. So yeah, I wanna, if you are able to, I'm gonna stand wobbly because we've been sitting so long. I think we should all stand and say this relative's name. Michelle Henry. So I'll say their name. Is there or her? Okay. So when I say her name, we'll say Michelle Henry. Okay. Say her name. Michelle Henry. Say her name. Michelle Henry. Say her name. Michelle Henry. Because, like my sis said, they don't cease to exist. Although stolen and taken, they become a revered kupuna. When one of our revered kupunas passed away, Kekuhi Kanakole said, "Wa oma kua oi, you have become an ancestor." This person, our people, they return to the depths of Kanaloa, to the Iave. The same words that we see used to describe the ocean can also be described in the womb. And so even in our human form, that we could not hold this person and we could not keep these people safe, our ancestors can and do and will. And so I know that this person, and all the peoples that we hold in our hearts and our minds who have gone, wa auma kua lako, they are in the hands of our ancestors. They are with this kanaloa that we will so ferociously defend, because they return to the placenta of Mother Earth, where they can be held in the womb in the sacredness that they should always be held with and revered with. So I thank you. And I pledge that we are here for you as part of the report, as part of your older siblings, your aunties. I pledge that to you, to the mahū community, to walk beside you. So that no more stolen sisters, no more stolen relatives. I pledge that to you. This report, we pledge that to the people and to Hawaiʻi as our foremothers and grandmothers. So mahalo. Mahalo, and we're here for you. Mahalo.
Thank you. Mahalo. Okay, oh, that was beautiful. Thank you for teaching us that, so that next time if someone else shares, we know now to say their name. Thank you, mahalo. And that's what's great about these spaces. Kalama, and then Kalama will be our last speaker, and then we will, Ihilani has a presentation.
Aloha, mahalo to you, everyone. This is such a beautiful presentation. Mahalo, Helani. You always make the palina, the weaving together, and I just really want to mahalo. You know, Makanalani, when 20 years ago I wrote an article about the impact of military Native Hawaiians, there was no data about Native Hawaiian women and the impact that happened. So I just aloha you so much for doing the research that you do. And really, Ihilani, I really want to work with you because I just love this history. I've been working for 20 years with supporting and working in allyship with Palestine and Hawaii, and I never knew the things that you shared with me today. And so mahalo nui for that. I just feel so inspired from the things you do, and I want to talk to you afterwards. And I want to ask everybody here, I'm going to be a part of the Freedom Flotilla going through. We're going to challenge the illegal blockade by the water, by the IDF, by Israel. We are going to try to challenge it every year. They try to challenge this and bring 100,000 tons of aid to the Palestinian people. So this summer, we are striving to do that. So please watch out for us as Kanaka Maoli, as a woman, as a physician. I'm going to do everything I can to bring the voices of Kamawana Nui, not just Kanaka Maoli, but Kanaki, Guahan, Aotearoa, Australia, all of our peoples, because we are connected by Amana Nui. And mahalo nui to everybody here, because it is all of us who hold up our own parts of the sky. It feels small, it feels little, that we're not doing much, and sometimes it feels like we're gonna get crushed down by it. But because each one of us holds up our part of the sky, none of us are gonna get crushed. Mahalo nui.
Mahalo, Dr. Nihio. Both her mother and her father were part of the occupation at Kalama Valley, and which sparked our movement. So she comes from a whole genealogy of Aloha ʻāina, and I'll hand it over to Ihilani to end it for us. Thank you.
Mahalo. I don't really have a presentation. It's more of a mele and a song that I'm sending over right now, so that it plays. Let me just check this really quickly. Yeah, just let me know when you get it. I'll give context to the mele. I know we should be wrapping up soon. This song was created about 2 years ago now at a protest. So lyrically is the best. Maybe not. Is the hook sick? I think so. But this song is called Drip Drop, and it was written in December of 2021, and that's when we got news that Red Hill, not the first time, but in recent events, thousands of gallons of jet fuel leaked. And if you don't know, Kapukaki, Red Hill, just miles from where we are, there's 20 tanks in total. They're about 100 feet wide, but they're terribly created. So they were created in World War II. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was in charge of constructing these Red Hill fuel tanks. I took my slippers off, so I can't really see. But if you've ever seen a local slipper or a rubble slipper, it's that thick. Not even croc level thickness of these Red Hill fuel tanks. And so in advocating and being in organizing, we know that folks don't need the nitty-gritty details of the ways in which our ʻāina has been polluted to understand or feel the effects of its pollution and its desecration. And so I was at the protest. Kalel was there too, I believe, and a couple organizers were like, we need a rallying cry. We need to pull people together. And there were folks like flipping us off, honking us, like saying that we were ridiculous for trying to stop the US Navy. But the fact is that it happened, and Hawaiians are no strangers to this struggle. We look at Kaho'olawe. We got the largest military in the world to leave one of our most sacred islands. So what we're doing now isn't something new. It's a continuation of the legacy that our kupuna have left for us to resist colonialism. You know, and Hawaiians have been resisting colonialism since even before our occupation. Look at the life and legacy of our monarchs, Queen Liliuokalani, like George Helm, who's not in a li'i, but someone I considered a revered kupuna who have used this history and legacy of mele, whether it be pa leo leo, Hawaiian hip hop or more traditional mele, to talk about our history and our story of us as being kaulana napua, the famous flowers of Hawaii. I mean, flowers aren't just meant to be beautiful or to smell nice, but to be adorned. And you know, like when we're talking about ola ika vai, the pua don't blossom unless the vai is there, and the vai isn't there unless the kanaka are there to protect it. Yeah, is the... All right, so we're gonna cue up this beat. Before I get that going, there's a hook, and it goes drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. 2 more times now. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. All right, you can run the beat. It's just a little fun song. The kids love it. Run that beat. Where's that from? Loud and Out. That's actually not a show we should bring into this conversation, but yeah, run that beat. Could you run it from the top? All right. Yeah, drip drop, olikavai, and it starts off with the hook. Okay. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. 2 more times now. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Acapella, let me take you back to 1943, the year that started this catastrophe, when the tanks were created by the military and Roosevelt was the president. Franklin D, there's 20 tanks in total. They're 100 feet wide, but they're so underground they'll never see the sky. They rest right above our largest aquifer, but this ʻāina is our mother. Get your hands off of her and now drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. 2 more times now. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. No, this is only what we do. No, imagine what we don't know. What a crisis is a time bomb that's bound to explode. The U.S. is nothing more than a war machine with capitalism reigns supreme. Matter of fact, HKT said it best: when the U.S. goes to war, Hawaiians lose their land. Just look at what they did to our sacred Moku. This ʻāina is our mother. They did nothing but abuse us. So drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. 2 more times now. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. And now our water's being poisoned by Uncle Sam. This is imperialism's master plan. So hands off our waters, hands off our daughters. We are not your sheep. You can take us out to slaughter, but keep in mind, the worst is not over. There's oil still leaking from the U.S. Arizona. Been for 80 years, right into Pu'uloa. So we will not rest until this fight is over. So drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. 2 more times now. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. Drip, drop, the military we got to stop. When I say land, you say back. Let me hear you land, 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 land. When I say ola, you say vai. Ola, 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 ola. Mahalo nui, mahalo nui. Ola ika vai, ola kapanui. Ola. We occupy Hawaii and Palestine. Eo, eo.
Mahalo, everybody. Mahalo to our panelists. Mahalo to Teen Online. Mahalo to Madison Owens, who's always, helping out wherever she can. What is it? Nijoni Online, who's been doing our Zoom. Mahalo to Purple Mai'a. And please do the survey for Purple Mai'a for the use of this space, please. And that's part of our agreement with them. I think we should be sending the link on Zoom for them to do the survey, and then if you guys could fill that out as well. We have stickers in the front if you guys want. And mahalo everyone for coming. Have a great rest of the week. And for you folks here from FestPac, have the great rest of FestPac. Thank you, mahalo. Oh, and there's more food. Please go eat. Oh, and there's tea. Oh, yes, and we have the safety kit handouts. So for those of you who are needing that information, the safety toolkit for RIMPAC for women and vulnerable, our vulnerable sisters and brothers, mahū to spirit. Please grab one of those packets, and let's keep the discussion going. Mahalo everyone for coming.